I just want to recap last night's Democratic primary race. I mean, if you look at the Republican side, it was actually surprising. The only state, Donald Trump, obviously, he likes to dominate all of his states. He did that. He did that very well. But if you look at Utah, you had John Kasich even finish ahead of Trump, which is actually kind of interesting. I'm not really sure if Trump just didn't focus on Utah or not, but it's just weird. But we're gonna focus mainly on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, rough battle between them. Arizona was the biggest state of the night. 75 delegates for that. Hillary Clinton winning 44 to 30 delegates. We'll get back to that in a moment. But Idaho and Utah. So 23 delegates for Idaho. That's how many were at stake, and 33 for Utah. So now, if you look at the delegate size and how much are actually at stake for this primary for this day, Utah and Idaho don't the amount of delegates that you can win aren't even as nearly as close as Arizona's 75, but so anyways, it was Bernie Sanders that won the night. That's no you can't doubt that. Bernie Sanders winning with 17 delegates in Idaho and 26 in Utah. Clinton only took 5 and 6 from both of those votes. But the big one was Arizona, because Hillary Clinton took 44 delegates, Bernie Sanders with 30. You add all those up, and Bernie Sanders actually walked out with more delegates than Hillary Clinton. However, could Bernie Sanders have possibly won Arizona? If you look at all the skepticisms and all the nonsense that happened last night, if you remember correctly, Arizona was won at 8:30. It was called at 8:30 Arizona time. This was back when 1% of the entire state was reporting, and not even the biggest county, which is Maricopa County, home to Phoenix, was even 1%, not even a 0.5% of Maricopa County was counted at that time, because there were thousands of people still waiting in line. The last vote was cast at midnight at that time. It was 3 a.m. by the time that that Eastern time figured out and everything like that. But if you actually look at Hillary Clinton winning that state, it was the weirdest thing, because I looked at it and I was like, 1% of the votes cast and everything like that. And then I saw all these news stories that it took 5 hours for some people. Some people went out to vote on their lunch break, and all of a sudden, 5 hours later, it took up most of their work day. And I thought that was a disgrace. Bernie Sanders called it a disgrace. I called it bullshit. And one of the biggest, first of all, no matter if there's any if there happens to be any voter fraud or anything like that, or any story that comes about, or whatever, no matter what happens with that state, or if they actually do, because I know that liberal activists are actually saying that there should be a recount, or they should do some the people that were given provisional ballots, if you could count them as well, would they actually matter? Because provisional ballots are just giving someone a vote, and hey, your vote's not count, but write your little circle in your little bubble. But yeah, so you look at the amount of time that it took people to vote that night. They called it on 1% of the vote for Hillary Clinton. There was 1%, as tens of thousands of Arizonians in the various counties continued to vote, and Maricopa County wasn't even done yet. People were waiting in line in Arizona, being told that Hillary Clinton win, and your vote wouldn't count. But ask yourself this: how does the news media call the election on 1% of the vote for Hillary Clinton, as tens of thousands of Arizonians are in the various counties continue to have more than a 4-hour wait ahead of them? That's what they were told, 4 hours to vote. And how did they know that those who hadn't voted yet wouldn't make a difference, when a single percent, that leaves 99% of the whole state left? How did they know that they wouldn't make a difference? Was the vote being determined by something other than the voters? And if the media calls, even if the media calls were honest, then why did the news networks wait so long after the end of voting in Idaho and Utah to call those two states where it could not be denied that Sanders won in a landslide? I mean, even if you look at the Democratic primaries in Idaho and Utah, Bernie Sanders won. This was 78%. He didn't just win; he crushed Hillary. He won 78 to 21%. If you look at Utah, he won 79% to 20%. But the news media didn't call those states until like midnight to 1 a.m. This time, but they call it. They waited so long to call those two states, but Arizona was called at 8:30 Arizona time. This was 30 minutes after the polls closed, and I'm like, how does that even happen? Bernie Sanders just killed the other two states, and he wasn't even called, at the beginning. Then, that is news bias, and I call bullshit. It's a rough day. But again, Arizona, 75 delegates. Bernie Sanders has to make some of those delegates up. There are liberal activists. Again, I will mention this as I have mentioned before. Arizona liberal activists are requesting that those delegates be recounted and everything be redone and all the votes be recast and all that. They're actually calling for a re-election with that Arizona primary, but obviously Hillary Clinton winning with 44 to 30 delegates, and actually they're calling for Hillary to forfeit her delegates that she won that night. So that is one of the biggest things going on right now. I don't understand it. I really don't. But again, all the signs are pointing. I usually don't try to believe these conspiracies, but how else can you not?